Alright guys, this is Brandon here. I just wanted to make a quick video because I've been getting a ton of questions on the Integra build, like in the comments section, where people are asking, what exactly do I need to turbo? I saw your turbo kit, is that everything you need? Is there anything missing? Well, I'll get into basically an in-depth of everything you need for a 92 to 95 Integra and a 92 to 95 Civic, basically. You can start out with your manifold, the turbo manifold. You're going to want to go with the cast manifold because they're cheap and they're reliable, and you just from there you look at what style the wastegate is. Most likely it's going to be like the 2-bolt style, what you saw on my manifold. Then you're going to go to the wastegate. You're going to buy your wastegate and make sure it matches the manifold style. You can spend all the money in the world on a wastegate, all the way up to some expensive ones, or you can go out with a cheap one. Your wastegate is a pretty important part of the car, so if you really like your car and don't want to blow it up, you may want to spend a little bit extra on the wastegate. I have a really cheap one, and then if it gets stuck shut and overboosts the car and blows it up, oh well, it's not a big deal. So then on from your manifold to the wastegate, your turbo is the next thing in line that you're going to want to look at. On the turbo, it really is just user preference. You can go online, there's a ton of different forums where people talk about, oh, I use this on my D16, oh, I use this on my B18, oh, but this is better for more spool, but this is better for more horsepower. If you look at the generic T3, T4, eBay turbo stuff, that pretty much will get you into that horsepower range of like 300 to 350. And when I say reliably, I mean like in the eBay sense, like it might not smoke for a couple months and then it might last you a little while, but they're definitely not long life turbos by any means. It's something to get it on there, get it tuned, and get it running, get the whole setup together before you go and drop $1,000 on a turbo. You can pay 150 bucks for one. So after your turbo, you're going to want to be looking at your intercooler piping. I have a pre-bent kit, but I don't know if it's exactly going to fit because it was for a Civic. And I think the Civic to Integras are a little bit different. The cars are almost identical, but I think in the fender well, when it wraps around, it's going to be different. But 99% of the time, people are just going to buy generic piping kits where it's just got a bunch of bends and some straights and a bunch of silicone couplers. And what you can do is just, build it out slowly, piece by piece, cut the couplers, or cut your pipes and couple them together. If you're lucky enough to have a friend that TIG welds aluminum, you can actually cut it and then mock it up and then have, mark it and have him weld it all together after you're done. And that's going to mate up to the next piece of the puzzle, your intercooler. Your intercooler doesn't need to be some huge big old race car thing if you're just trying to put down like 300 horsepower. Pretty much any front mount small intercooler is going to work, aftermarket wise. A stock one, like some people try to take the ones out of like Volvos and stuff like that. Don't do that. They're way too thin and they're just hard to get to work. They're cheap enough now on eBay. You can get a decent intercooler for like nothing. Most of the time you can buy the piping kit and it comes with the intercooler with it. So that'll get you started on that and you'll be good. And attached to that is your next piece, which is the blow-off valve. A lot of people say, low horsepower levels, you don't need a blow-off valve, but you need a blow-off valve if you want to be cool. Because how are you going to make the choo-choo-choo-choo or, noises without a blow-off valve? You got to have a blow-off valve. Actually, if you don't have a blow-off valve, it'll compressor surge like crazy, and that sounds pretty cool too. But if you want to save a little bit of life on the already dying eBay turbo that you have, you buy a $30 blow-off valve. They're not much money at all. You can get a cheap one off of eBay too. So and I don't mean eBay specifically. You can actually go to Amazon and buy cheap eBay, or Chinese turbo parts on there too. So it's not just eBay, it's just eBay has a ton of them. So that's why I use it, and the only drawback is the shipping times on some of the stuff. If you're not careful, shipping times are outrageous. It could be 2 months before you get something because they got to put it on a boat, drive it over here, they get lost, and they take a detour, and then they come and finally they give it to the UPS guy and it never makes it to your house. But that's a whole nother subject. So after your blow-off valve for your intercooler piping and your intercooler, you're going to want a feed line kit, and that is oil feed, and that's what keeps the turbo lubricated and cooled down. And the cheap feed line kits will actually come with a T-block. I have one right here actually. Let's see here. This is a when I first got my turbo kit, before I picked it up, he told me it didn't have a feed line, so I bought a feed line kit. Oh, I set it and it didn't come with it, but this one comes with some AN fittings, but most of the time they come with a T-block, and it's like a splitter, and you can tee off of the oil pressure sending unit, which is in the other kit back there, but or you can do an oil sandwich plate on the oil filter, but either of those ways will be able to get you oil from the motor to the turbo. And then on the bottom side of the turbo, you're going to have your oil drain. A drain line kit is cheaper than dirt. I mean, you can buy one for like 10-15 bucks. All it is a piece of line that comes off the bottom of the turbo and goes down to your oil pan. On Hondas, you can buy a turbo oil pan, but I don't suggest it because it's a lot of money just for an oil pan that's got a little fitting on it. So what you can actually do is try to find a friend that's got a welder, or the really sloppy way, which I've done before, but I'm probably not going to do this time. You can take your oil pan off and you can mark your hole, drill your hole, and take the fitting that comes with the kit to where you slide the pipe on, and you can actually JB weld that on. But don't tell anybody I told you that. So because it probably will leak because it gets hot and JB weld doesn't like heat. So just go ahead and buy like the steel, the kit that comes with the little steel fitting, and then you can sand down your oil pan and weld that on. Or you can do what I did on my last car, and you take a big socket and you drill out the center of the socket, you sand down on the side of your oil pan, and you weld the socket to it, and then you use that for sliding the hose on. That's a really cheap way, and my line actually popped off of that a couple times and then was spewing oil all over the place. So I don't exactly suggest that either, but it works. So that's kind of what we're getting at here. You know, this isn't always the best way, but it's a way. You can always spend more money and buy an oil pan that's already got a fitting put on it for a drain line, but not all of us can afford that. So after you get your feed line, your drain line, and you're draining into your pan, you got your pan situation figured out, then you're going to be on to the fuel. So you need bigger injectors and a bigger fuel pump. A standard rule of thumb is a Walbro 255 LPH, which is liters per hour, is a pretty good fuel pump. On Hondas, people run them 300 to, I want to say 350 horsepower, maybe a little bit more. But they're cheap, and actually name brand ones are really cheap, but I always cheap out and I never get the name brand ones. And actually this time I got an Air Motive 340 knockoff, which is another good pump that's actually fairly reasonable. But I got my Air Motive knockoff for like 30 bucks. So if it flows even half of, 300 or whatever, if I get 200 liters per hour out of it, I'll be happy for 30 bucks. I can't even get the Walbro knockoff for that cheap. So after you got your fuel pump, you'll go to your injectors, and when you're looking at your injector size, stock I believe is 240 cc's. So a good rule of thumb is like 450 to 500 cc's is like good for 300 horsepower roughly on a Honda safely. You can push them more, but then you may have problems because you're pushing them harder than they're supposed to. And then people put in like 1000 cc injectors when they're trying to do E85 and push some big power. But 450 to 500 cc injectors will get you going. And on a 92 to 95 Civic and Integra, you're going to want high impedance injectors, so that way they'll wire straight into your harness. You just cut and splice them like I did on my last video, and you don't have to worry about any other issues. If you get low impedance, you have to actually wire in a resistor box, because if you wire them straight in, they will not work. So that's just something to look at, because a lot of low impedance like DSM, Evo injectors with like 450cc stock, they sell for really cheap on eBay. But don't be fooled, because then you have to buy a resistor box, and then you have to do a little bit more wiring. So it ends up being about the same as just buying a set of high impedance injectors to begin with. But then you have your fuel, you have your turbo, feed, oil, you basically have everything you need. But stop. You need to go ahead and put some good oil in it. I use Rotella 15W40. I know a lot of guys that use Rotella 5W40 and some of the Mobil 1, Delvac, but a lot of the turbo diesel engine oils are really good because they're cheap and they are used to being in a turbo like vehicle. They're not recommended for gas vehicles because 99% of the time you're supposed to have a cat on, and these will actually, a lot of the stuff that's in the oil, the zinc and stuff, will burn off and it will clog cats. But if you're turboed and you're getting tuned and you're doing all this to your car, you're probably not going to have a cat on it. Your tuner's going to tune that out. So you're going to have your cat already cut off a long time ago, and you don't care about clogging nothing because there ain't nothing to clog. So a good oil like that. Some people get into like running the AMSOIL and all that stuff. If you can afford it, do you. But I just do Rotella, the 15W40, and I change my oil more often. I do about 2,000 to 3,000 miles at most, because I beat on that oil. And if it's looking a little like real black ahead of time on my Civic, I would change it all the time. So get you a good oil in there, and then on to the last and probably the most important part, your tuner. You need to contact your tuner before you even start your build and tell him what you want to do, and ask for any advice, and make sure he's comfortable tuning it. Because if he's not comfortable tuning it, then it doesn't matter what you do. If he's not going to tune it, your car, if you drive it, it'll blow up. Some people will say, oh, run a FMU, a fuel management unit. Don't do that. If you like your car and you don't want it to blow up like soon, don't do it. People get away with it by pulling timing and putting the FMU on and running rich, but you're not really getting your full potential at all. You're maybe getting 75% potential at max. You're losing out on a lot of horsepower, and you're losing out on even more reliability. So get it tuned. It's not really that big of a deal for a 92 to 95 Civic and Integra, because as you saw in one of my last videos, the ECUs are chippable. So you can get them chipped, or you can buy one that's chipped online. And you can actually even buy them with base maps on them, so that way you can drive it to the tuner, because it'll already be set up for the injectors, or you can contact your tuner and he'll burn you a chip. But super simple, super cheap. It doesn't cost as much as like doing a Honda like S300 or K Pro for the K series or newer Civics, because I mean that's blowing the budget out when you're talking about a budget build. So after you have a good tuner and he sets you up and you tell him what you're doing, he's happy with it, you get all your stuff together, you put it all on, and you head down there, get it tuned, and enjoy living the boost life, because honestly it's a lot of fun. There's not really anything else like it in the car scene. You can jump in a 250 to 300 horsepower Honda and have a blast, just because they're really, really peppy and snappy, and I can't even explain it to you, so you have to just go do one or ride one yourself. There's no power per dollar. The LS is probably the only other platform that even comes close, but you're still going to be paying more, and they're not even as abundant. You can get them out of trucks and stuff, but that's a whole nother conversation. So after we talked about all that stuff, you're ready to go. You're tuned, you're boosting and stuff. Oh, I forgot about spark plugs. You're going to want to go spark plugs. Recommended, actually they're right in front of me, that's why I saw them, but I run the NGK V-Powers, and they're the BKR7E, and then I'll repeat that again, BKR7Es. They're really cheap, so that way you can replace them all the time. You don't need to replace them all the time. You usually can get about 10 to 15,000 miles on these plugs, no problem. And in a little turbo car that you're probably playing around with, 10,000 to 15,000 miles is a good amount of time. But those are colder range plugs than the stock plugs. And when you get there, your tuner will be able to tell you, you just tell him you didn't gap them yet, and he'll be able to pull them out, gap them down a little bit, and that's where you kind of get into the area of tuning, and they'll take care of that. So I don't think I missed anything else. I think that's everything. But oh, I also got some more stuff for the Integra today. I got some turn signal housings, because if you saw when I bought the car, they were all busted out. So I got the clear ones with the black on the inside. And before anybody says anything, oh, you're blowing your budget build, these are genuine Chinese, and they were like $12.99 on eBay. They took, when I got the car, I ordered these, so they've took over like, I don't know. Uh-oh. It didn't break. But it took like over 2 weeks to get these shipped, which, I don't know. For me, it feels like forever. But, so I got those in, and the next thing that I'm going to be doing with the Integra is I want to get it on the dyno and do a couple base runs to find out where the horsepower is at before I even turbo it. So if y'all think you know how much horsepower it's going to make, just comment down below and call it out, horsepower and torque. I think it's going to make 105 horsepower and 100 torque, because it's definitely lost some power through the years, but I'm really still hoping for those triple digits, you know. Come on Integra, you got it. But so comment down below what y'all think it's going to make, and I will hopefully see you soon on the next video. Thank you for watching. This is Brandon. What's up, Backhat? What do you say? This is just a teaser video for everybody.